Welcome to the Truth in Crime Case Files. Brielle Gonzalez was not average high school senior. At 17, she had already mapped out her future with the clarity and determination that often escaped her peers. Born and raised in the small, tight-knit community of Ashland, Oregon, Brielle was known for her bright personality, intelligence, and her eye for capturing beauty through the lens of a camera. Brielle lived with her mother, Brielle Gonzalez, and her stepfather, Victor Langford, in a modest, cozy home near the outskirts of town. She was the editor of the school's photography club and spent countless hours after school snapping shots of the rolling hills and forests surrounding her picturesque town. Her teachers often praised her creativity and dedication, noting that Brielle's passion for photography seemed to mirror her enthusiasm for life itself. Hazel, a nurse at the local hospital, had raised Brielle on her own for most of her early years after her husband, Brielle's father, died in a tragic car accident when she was just a toddler. Despite this early loss, Hazel had built a stable, loving environment for Brielle, filling their lives with warmth and positivity. It wasn't until 5 years ago that Victor, a successful attorney with a charismatic smile, entered their lives. The community viewed Victor as a kind, upstanding man who had stepped into the role of a father figure with ease. To outsiders, the Gonzalez-Langford family appeared perfect, a harmonious blend of love and support. But beneath the surface, not everything was as idyllic as it seemed. Over the years, as Brielle grew older, she began to sense a subtle shift in Victor's demeanor. He was meticulous and demanding, often imposing his strict views on Brielle's life and choices. Small disagreements between them would often escalate into heated arguments. Friends would later recount how Brielle confided in them about the growing tension at home, expressing how she felt trapped under Victor's overbearing presence. Despite these conflicts, Brielle remained close to her mother, always striving to maintain peace for Hazel's sake. In the months leading up to her death, those closest to Brielle noticed a change. Her once carefree demeanor became clouded with unease. She was more withdrawn, often distracted in class, and less enthusiastic about her future plans. Her best friend, Mia Torres, noticed this shift the most. Mia and Brielle had been inseparable since childhood, sharing everything from late-night study sessions to their dreams of leaving their small town for college in the big city. Mia often pressed Brielle about what was troubling her, but Brielle brushed off her concerns, insisting she was fine. Yet, there were moments, glimpses of fear in Brielle's eyes or an unexplained urgency in her voice, that told a different story. As the days passed, the undercurrents of tension at the Gonzalez-Langford home grew stronger. Brielle often found herself in the middle of heated exchanges between her mother and stepfather. Victor's once charming exterior began to crack, revealing a harsher, more controlling side. Neighbors occasionally overheard raised voices coming from the house, but no one suspected anything beyond typical family squabbles. Unbeknownst to her family, Brielle had stumbled upon a secret that would shatter their fragile sense of normalcy, a secret that threatened to destroy the very foundation of their family unit. Brielle discovered that Victor was having an affair. One afternoon, while searching for a book in his study, she accidentally found a series of explicit emails and nude photographs on his computer. The woman in the photos was Jenna Collins, a young paralegal from Victor's law firm. The discovery left Brielle reeling. She felt a wave of betrayal, not just for her mother, but for herself. Her immediate thought was to confront Victor, to force him to end the affair and tell her mother the truth. But as she considered the ramifications, fear began to creep in. She worried about what this revelation would do to her mother, who had already suffered so much loss in her life. For weeks, Brielle wrestled with the weight of the secret. The knowledge hung heavy over her, a dark cloud that seemed to follow her every step. She began to act out, rebelling against Victor's rules in small ways, missing curfew, skipping family dinners, avoiding him at all costs. She became more isolated, withdrawing even from her friends, unable to share the burden of what she knew. Victor, sensing her growing distance, became more authoritarian, tightening his grip over the household. He demanded respect and obedience, which only fueled Brielle's resolve to expose him. She began documenting her findings, taking photos of his car parked outside Jenna's apartment, recording snippets of conversations, and saving the emails she had discovered. She knew she needed to gather proof, evidence that could not be ignored or explained away. As Brielle's behavior became more erratic, Victor's suspicions grew. He had noticed her watching him, her accusatory glances and her newfound defiance. He realized she knew about his affair, and with that realization came a dangerous desperation to protect his secrets at any cost. The walls were closing in, and soon, the tension within the Gonzalez-Langford household would reach a breaking point, leading to a tragic and irreversible outcome. The morning was unusually cold for early October, and the small town of Ashland was just beginning to stir. The sun was still tucked behind thick clouds, casting a gray shadow over the neighborhood. It was a typical weekday, and Brielle Gonzalez's absence from her early photography club meeting did not initially raise any alarms. Her friends assumed she was running late or had a sudden change of plans. However, as the minutes turned into hours, worry began to settle in. Brielle was known for her punctuality and commitment. She never missed a meeting without a reason. Mia Torres, Brielle's best friend, tried calling her several times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Concerned, Mia decided to text Brielle's mother, Hazel, who replied quickly, noting that she had left for her early shift at the hospital and hadn't seen Brielle that morning. Panic began to creep in. Mia, along with a few other friends from the club, decided to drive over to Brielle's house to check on her. Upon arriving at the Gonzalez-Langford home, Mia felt an uneasy stillness in the air. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. The house was eerily quiet. She hesitated for a moment before trying the door handle. It was unlocked. Mia pushed the door open and called out for Brielle, her voice echoing through the empty hallway. The silence was unnerving. As she walked through the living room and into the corridor leading to Brielle's bedroom, she felt a knot form in her stomach. Something was wrong. Mia opened Brielle's bedroom door and was immediately struck by a horrific sight. Brielle was lying on the floor, her body twisted unnaturally, with a large pool of blood surrounding her head. A broken vase lay nearby, its jagged edges smeared with blood, and several framed photographs were scattered across the room. Mia's scream pierced the stillness, shattering the morning calm. She rushed to Brielle's side, her hands trembling as she tried to shake her awake, but Brielle's body was cold to the touch. Desperate and terrified, Mia fumbled for her phone and dialed 911, her voice barely a whisper as she told the operator what she had found. Within minutes, the quiet street was filled with the wailing sirens of emergency vehicles. Paramedics rushed inside, but it was too late. Brielle was already gone. The police arrived shortly after, led by Detective Penelope Hartman, a seasoned officer with a reputation for solving difficult cases. As she stepped into the chaotic scene, she took a moment to assess the room, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. The crime scene was a mess, but something about it seemed staged, almost as if someone had attempted to make it look like a burglary gone wrong. Hazel Gonzalez arrived home shortly after receiving Mia's frantic call. As she saw the police cars and ambulance outside her house, her heart sank. She pushed her way through the crowd, screaming her daughter's name, only to be held back by a police officer. When she finally laid eyes on Brielle's lifeless body, crumpled on the bedroom floor, she collapsed in a fit of grief and disbelief. Her cries echoed through the neighborhood, a chilling reminder of the tragedy that had just unfolded. Victor Langford arrived soon after, his face pale and expressionless. He quickly moved to comfort Hazel, wrapping his arms around her in a protective embrace. To the neighbors who had gathered outside, he appeared every bit the concerned stepfather, devastated by the loss. But Detective Hartman noticed the slight twitch in his eye and the way he avoided looking directly at Brielle's body. There was something off about his demeanor, something that didn't sit right with her. As the police began their preliminary investigation, they noted several oddities about the scene. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Brielle likely knew her attacker. The scattered photographs and broken vase hinted at a struggle, but there was no evidence of theft. Nothing appeared to be missing. Detective Hartman ordered a full forensic sweep of the house and instructed her team to question everyone present. She knew that the first 48 hours were critical in a homicide investigation and that every second counted. Word of Brielle's death spread quickly through the community, leaving friends and neighbors in shock. How could such a bright and promising young life be cut short so suddenly? As the reality of the tragedy set in, a cloud of grief and confusion descended over the town. Everyone wanted answers. But as the investigation began, it became clear that the truth behind Brielle Gonzalez's death would be far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The police worked tirelessly through the day, piecing together what little evidence they had. Detective Hartman, with her instincts honed by years of experience, knew they were dealing with something far more complex than a simple burglary gone wrong. She had a gut feeling that the key to solving this case lay somewhere within the walls of the Gonzalez Langford home, and she was determined to uncover every dark secret it held. The investigation into Brielle Gonzalez's death was launched immediately, with Detective Penelope Hartman at the helm. Known for her meticulous approach, Hartman wasted no time in assembling a team of seasoned detectives and forensic experts. The initial findings were unsettling. There were no signs of forced entry into the home, suggesting that Brielle had known her killer. The broken vase, scattered photographs, and lack of any stolen items pointed to a crime of passion rather than a random act of violence. The blunt force trauma to Brielle's head indicated a violent struggle, possibly with someone she trusted. Detective Hartman began by interviewing those closest to Brielle. Hazel Gonzalez, still reeling from the shock, recounted her last moments with her daughter. She mentioned nothing seemed amiss, although Brielle had been more withdrawn in recent weeks. Victor Langford, the stepfather, appeared calm but evasive during questioning. He expressed his grief, describing his relationship with Brielle as strained but typical of a teenager and step-parent. However, when asked about his whereabouts on the morning of Brielle's death, his answers were vague and inconsistent. He claimed to have been out for a morning jog, but no one had seen him, and there were no witnesses to corroborate his alibi. Detectives also spoke with Brielle's friends, who painted a different picture. Mia Torres, her best friend, mentioned that Brielle had been acting strangely and seemed scared in the days leading up to her death. She revealed that Brielle had confided in her about discovering something troubling about Victor, though Brielle hadn't shared the specifics. This revelation heightened suspicions around Victor, who now seemed to have both motive and opportunity. Forensic experts combed through the house, focusing on Brielle's room, the apparent site of the attack. They recovered strands of hair from the broken vase and fragments of Victor's skin under Brielle's fingernails, suggesting a physical altercation between them. They also discovered partial fingerprints on a few scattered photographs and the edges of the broken vase. These clues began to form a picture of a violent encounter that had escalated quickly. The investigation intensified when Brielle's phone was recovered from a nearby dumpster. Forensic analysis of the phone revealed a series of text messages and voice memos between Brielle and Victor, indicating a growing conflict. In these messages, Brielle confronted Victor about an affair she had discovered and threatened to expose him to her mother, Hazel. The tone of Victor's responses was increasingly aggressive, warning Brielle to stay silent and not interfere in his personal matters. The final voice memo, recorded just hours before her death, captured Brielle pleading with Victor, her voice shaking with fear. Detective Hartman now had enough evidence to consider Victor a prime suspect. The conflicting alibi, the physical evidence, and the messages pointing to a heated confrontation all pointed to him. As the investigation continued, the team prepared to make a move that would bring them closer to uncovering the truth behind Brielle's tragic death. With Victor Langford now the primary suspect in Brielle Gonzalez's murder, Detective Penelope Hartman focused her investigation on uncovering every aspect of his life. Despite his attempts to appear cooperative, Victor's behavior during interviews raised red flags. His shifting alibi and evasive answers painted a picture of a man with something to hide. The text messages between him and Brielle suggested a heated argument and a clear motive. Brielle had discovered his affair with Jenna Collins, a paralegal at his law firm, and had threatened to expose him. Jenna Collins, the woman at the center of the affair, was brought in for questioning. Nervous and visibly shaken, Jenna admitted to the affair with Victor but claimed she knew nothing about Brielle's death. She insisted that Victor had promised to leave Hazel but never mentioned any trouble with his stepdaughter. Jenna's testimony, though lacking direct involvement, added to the motive. It became clear that Victor's secret was at risk of unraveling, giving him a strong incentive to silence Brielle. Other suspects were considered briefly. Some neighbors recalled hearing loud arguments from the Gonzalez-Langford house, but none reported seeing any strangers. Friends of Brielle confirmed she had been anxious and withdrawn in the days before her death, likely due to the tension at home. While the evidence against Victor was compelling, Detective Hartman wanted to ensure no stone was left unturned. Victor's colleagues at the law firm were also interviewed. A few mentioned his recent erratic behavior and temperamental outbursts. One colleague recalled a heated phone call between Victor and someone believed to be Brielle. The office's cleaning staff also mentioned that Victor had been unusually agitated the day before Brielle's death, pacing around his office, muttering about fixing things at home. The pieces were coming together. The more the detectives dug into Victor's life, the clearer it became that he was a man under immense pressure, driven by fear of exposure and loss. With each new lead, the case against him solidified. Detective Hartman prepared to bring Victor in for further questioning, determined to get a confession or find the final piece of evidence that would seal his fate. The investigation was closing in, and Victor Langford was running out of time. Detective Penelope Hartman knew they were close, but they still needed concrete evidence to tie Victor Langford directly to Brielle Gonzalez's murder. The investigation had been thorough, but the breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a surveillance camera from a neighbor's property across the street. The footage, initially dismissed as irrelevant, showed Victor's car parked outside the Gonzalez-Langford home during the exact time he claimed to be out jogging. The video didn't capture the actual crime, but it clearly contradicted Victor's alibi, placing him at the scene when Brielle was killed. The timestamp on the footage matched the estimated time of death, confirming he was present during the crucial moments. The second piece of the puzzle came from Brielle's laptop, which had been sent for forensic analysis. An IT specialist recovered a deleted file, a draft of an email Brielle had been writing to her mother. In the email, Brielle detailed her discovery of Victor's affair with Jenna Collins and expressed fear that Victor was becoming increasingly unstable. She wrote that she planned to confront him that morning, the same morning she was killed. The email, incomplete but damning, suggested Brielle's awareness of the danger she was in, lending weight to the theory that Victor had killed her to keep his secret safe. Confronted with this new evidence, Detective Hartman knew it was time to make her move. She decided to interrogate Victor one last time, armed with the video footage and the recovered email. During the interrogation, Victor maintained his innocence, but his composure began to crack under the weight of the evidence. Hartman pressed him about his movements, the email, and the footage showing his car. Cornered and increasingly agitated, Victor's story began to unravel. Suddenly, Victor blurted out, "I didn't mean to do it." She wouldn't stop. The room fell silent. He quickly realized his mistake, but it was too late. The partial confession was enough to break his defense. Detective Hartman seized the opportunity, pressing further until Victor, overwhelmed and realizing there was no way out, confessed to the crime. He admitted he had confronted Brielle in a rage, and things had spiraled out of control. Following Victor Langford's confession, the police moved swiftly. He was arrested on charges of first-degree murder and taken into custody. The arrest sent shockwaves through the small town of Ashland, shattering any remaining illusions about the seemingly perfect Langford-Gonzalez family. Hazel Gonzalez, already devastated by her daughter's death, was now faced with the horrifying reality that her husband had been the killer all along. The trial began 6 months later, drawing significant media attention. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing Victor's affair, his escalating arguments with Brielle, and the damning evidence of his presence at the crime scene. The recovered email and surveillance footage were pivotal, painting a clear picture of a man desperate to hide his secrets at any cost. Victor's defense team argued that the killing was not premeditated but a tragic accident, claiming he had only intended to confront Brielle, not kill her. Despite their efforts, the confession and overwhelming evidence left little room for doubt. After a brief deliberation, the jury found Victor Langford guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial's conclusion brought a sense of closure to Brielle's friends and family, though the emotional scars would remain. Hazel, broken but resilient, vowed to honor her daughter's memory by advocating for victims of domestic violence, hoping to prevent others from experiencing the same heartbreak. The trial of Victor Langford drew intense media scrutiny and public interest. In the courtroom, the prosecution presented a detailed case, supported by the damning evidence of Victor's affair, his conflicting alibi, and his confession. The emotional testimony from Brielle's friends and family painted a vivid picture of a vibrant young woman whose life was tragically cut short by a man who was supposed to protect her. The verdict brought a semblance of closure to the case, but the impact on the community and Brielle's family was profound. Hazel Gonzalez channeled her grief into advocacy work, focusing on raising awareness about domestic abuse and supporting victims of family violence. She dedicated herself to honoring Brielle's memory by working to prevent others from experiencing similar pain. Victor's conviction served as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk behind closed doors and the devastating consequences of secrets kept in the dark. The case left a lasting mark on the town of Ashland, forever altering its residents' understanding of trust and betrayal. A truth in crime case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.